Anything you say, can you use the rest of
All right, cool. So chat and try, I know we have a few people here that weren't here last time. So just to recap why we do this, normally in the Ashtanga tradition, once a week, they're on the last day of the practice. So normally Ashtangas practice 6 days a week. And so on the very last day, before the rest day, there would be an educational conference that they would call conference in India, but it has been affectionately turned into being called chat and chai because it's cute and it includes chat. We would have chai and we would be talking with chai. So it's kind of been affectionately turned into chat and chai. And you would talk about topics related to the yoga practice, and also students would bring any questions they had about the yoga practice. So even though we're always going to have a topic every session, this is a time and space for you to bring any questions that you might have that you want to ask the room, and we can talk about it. So this month we're talking about self-compassion and discipline, which is a very difficult balance, and I thought it would be a good topic for this month, which we're only doing it once a month right now because we're a tiny but mighty crew, and so I feel like we aren't at the space yet of having a weekly conference. Once a month is great. But it is January, people in January, we all tend to have a reset of the mind, even if you're not for resolutions. New Year's resolutions, culturally, we think of it as a new chapter. And I know many of us, even those that are not for resolutions, it's hard not to think of it as a new phase and having intentions in the new year. And I think that's fine. I have no problem with New Year's resolutions or intentions or anything. I do tend to prefer the word intentions versus resolutions, because when we say resolution, it's like, I will do this or else, and then if it doesn't happen, we feel shitty. If we say intention, it just changes the frame of thinking of that we will try to do this and give it our best shot, rather than we have to do this within a 365 calendar year, which, is hard to do. And that's part of what a yoga practice is trying to teach us, is that change happens in the long haul, that we can't just blink an eye and everything's different, but that day in and day out, we're evolving and changing. But intentions are good, and we want to have intentions in the yoga world, which yoga, in the larger umbrella idea, is everything. It's our ethics, it's how we live, it's not just a practice on the mat. And so as yogis, we do want to have intentions because we do want to evolve to be higher forms of ourselves. But with intentions, we want to be kind to ourselves about them. The first principle, does anybody know the first principle of being a yogi? The first yama?
Non-violence.
Yeah. Does anybody know the Sanskrit word for it? Ahimsa. Ahimsa. You've probably heard it a million times. So ahimsa means non-violence, non-harming. It means, a lot of people translate it just as love. It means that we are not supposed to cause harm within the world. And that is our very first, so the yamas, to jump around a little bit, the yamas are our ethical principles as yogis, and ahimsa is our very first one, to not cause harm. So it is the main code with which, as yogis, we're supposed to live our lives. And doing no harm is not just to the world, to others, but it's also to ourselves. We are not supposed to cause harm to ourselves. So when we think of our intentions, they're supposed to be compassionate intentions, things that are helping us evolve in a good way, and also we're not supposed to be assholes to ourselves in going about these intentions, which is hard because the other part of that is discipline. So we have our yamas, which are our ethics, and then we have our niyamas. Does anybody remember what a niyama is? People that took the last Beginner Ashtanga series?
Is ni yourself?
Yeah, so, yeah.
So treat yourself and such.
Yes, you're on the right path. So it's our code of conduct. So how we show up in the world.
Okay.
So if our ethics, our yamas, our principles, our niyamas are how we show up for those principles. And so there are things like saucha, cleanliness, it goes on. So, but we'll get to those a different day. But one of our niyamas is tapas. And tapas means discipline. It also means fire, heat, burning. The idea of tapas is that we cannot evolve unless we face things that challenge us. If we're just riding straight through without any obstacles, we're never going to evolve, which makes sense, I think, for most of us. And that's part of, I think, the power of yoga, particularly Ashtanga yoga, and all yoga, but we're here in the idea for Ashtanga practitioners. Of course, all are invited. But Ashtanga yoga gets, some not love because it's such an edgy, challenging practice. But I think part of the beauty of the practice is that it really makes you evolve and change. Like there's a lot of fire, there's a lot of tapas, there's a lot of discipline. And so as yogis, we are supposed to have discipline, which is part of having an intention. If we make an intention, we do need to build discipline in our lives in order to achieve that intention. But for us as Westerners, it's very hard for us to hold the concept of self-compassion and discipline in the same hand. We think of them as two opposing forces. That discipline is rigid and it's flagellating. If it is what we do self-compassion in order to escape from. We take bubble baths, watch Netflix forever because we're trying to escape from the discipline that we put out in the rest of our lives. And I do this, I'm not saying I don't, we all do it, because that's how we're trained to think. But in the yogic philosophy mindset, these go together. These are supposed to go hand in hand. We're supposed to have intention and discipline in a way that's compassionate to ourselves, that helps us become a better person, but we're supposed to treat it as we go about creating intentions and discipline. We're supposed to be very kind to ourselves with it. And so thinking just about our yoga practice, let's say your intention is to practice, 3 or 4 days a week. Let's just say you decide 4 days. Your intention is to practice 4 days a week. And then you don't practice a day, or you do practice all the days, but you feel like they're very shitty practices, like you do not enjoy them. If you're not kind to yourself in building this, if you skip a day and you're like, oh, I skipped a day, I'm the worst, I'm gonna fail at this, I'm a failure, or you got on your mat and you weren't able to do what you wanted to do, and you're just like, oh, I'm terrible, I'm so bad at this. One, that is causing harm for yourself, which is a direct violation of our yoga principle, and it's hard. We fail, but we're trying not to do this, cause harm to ourselves. But also, it makes it very hard to have that discipline be sustainable if you start to create a hatred around the discipline that you're doing. If you get on your mat and you're like, oh, I'm terrible at this, and that happens more often than not, you're going to start to hate your practice, which makes it very hard for you to want to get on your mat and do your practice. And I'm not saying you don't, our yoga practice shows us our modes of thinking, and if we're somebody that has a lot of self-hatred in our thoughts, it's going to bring that up. But we're supposed to respond to that with kindness, to be like, I see you, patterns of thinking, I know you're there, and try to come back gently to the practice rather than be like, yes, you're right, I am a failure, and going down that wormhole, which is very difficult. But as soon as we're able to notice that we're doing that, in terms of being kind to ourselves, we're not supposed to continue on that path as best we can. And even just saying, I have the mode of thinking of being like, oh, fuck this, I'm terrible at this, like I'm the worst. So what I found that helps more than anything is just labeling it, not trying to be like, oh, I'm not going to go there, I'm not going to go there, but just being like, I see that thought pattern. And just by doing that, just being like, I see that thought pattern, it creates a little bit of space. So even if my mind keeps doing that, every time I just call it a thought pattern, it takes me away from it a little bit because I'm labeling it for what it is. It's just a thought pattern. It's not truth. I don't have to believe it. It's just a thought pattern. And so we can do that in all parts of our lives, whatever comes up. But let's say it's a particular discipline and we're using yoga as a metaphor for it. And yoga is meant to be a metaphor for our lives. So whatever your discipline is, if you beat yourself up over the discipline, it's going to make it very hard to be sustainable, which does not help us in creating discipline in our lives. If we instead approach it with kindness towards ourselves, that we're coming to this mat to do something that's positive for ourselves, to help in our evolution, even on days that are really hard and you're just like, that was a hard day, okay, it makes it so much easier to get back on the mat. And I really feel like it's valuable to talk to yourself like you would a friend. Let's say you skipped 3 out of the 4 days you wanted to practice that week. Instead of being like, I fail, I'm never going to show my face in the yoga studio again. I'm being melodramatic. But instead of going down that way, talk to yourself how you would a friend. Just be like, hey, why did you miss practice this week? Oh, I was busy, I got yada yada, I was tired. Just be like, okay, you were tired. We'll just try again this week. And that makes it that much more sustainable because this all is meant to be seen in a long-term view, like I said at the start. We aren't meant to think of this as happening right now, that we get on our mat and everything changes, which of course we want to think about with all intentions we set, with all disciplines we're trying to do. We don't want to create an intention like, whatever your intention is, I'm going to write a novel this year. You don't want to think that by February you're going to have written your novel or half of your novel or whatever. You want to realize that it's a long process. It takes many steps. Building a handstand practice, like we were talking about handstands, it takes practice. Putting it in, day out, and slowly seeing the fruits of it. So you're meant to think about discipline in that way. And so that makes a day that sucked, or you felt like it sucked, it probably didn't actually suck. Any day you practice is a good practice, whatever your intention is. Or days that you skip, it makes it become a very small fragment of time. That week that you missed being on your mat, it's a very small fragment of time, like within the space of time. So learning how to be kind to yourself. But there is a flip side of that, because if you have all the self-understanding and self-compassion for yourself in the world and don't create any tapas, any discipline, it's a form of self-harm. Because if you're just like, I'm fine how I am, and you coast through life and you don't ever try to evolve, in yoga philosophy, that is doing harm to yourself because you're not becoming your highest self, the person. So in yoga philosophy, there's dharma, so everybody has a purpose that we're supposed to fulfill within this life. And it's not the same idea as destiny. And yoga doesn't believe that it's necessarily, in the Yoga Sutras, it doesn't believe that it's preordained, but you are supposed to fulfill a purpose in this life. And so if you don't ever push yourself to fulfill that purpose, it is a form of doing harm to yourself and the world because you're not showing up in the world of how you're supposed to be. So if you're, instead of being the person that's like, I'm the worst, if your tendency to be is like, it's cool that I didn't practice, or it's cool that I just did sun salutations, and it's very easy for you to go that route. I mean, yes, be kind to yourself. Don't be like, but be like, hey, I believe in my ability to do more. I believe in my ability to practice more days at home and set realistic goals. If you're able to practice once a month at home, try to make it twice a month. Be realistic. But you do want to create discipline and intention kindly, but if you don't create any discipline or any intention, you are not going to be the best version of yourself in the world. So we do want both, and it's a very hard balance trying to be both kind and disciplined. But that is what we're trying to do. And we're not trying to think of them as a yin and a yang, which is what a lot of people think of it as, is that we want to be kind, but also disciplined. They're supposed to be a marriage. That discipline is a form of kindness to ourselves, and through our kindness, we can have discipline. Like, they're supposed to go together. They're not supposed to be what we often think of as in Western world, where one is supremely negative and we have to retreat to a self-compassion from that negative thing. They're supposed to be a form of it. And I think most of us that enjoy our yoga practice, and I think everybody here does, do feel that it is a form of self-compassion, that it has healing. And when we can think of it in that light, it has those effects. And so whatever your intentions are, I want you to try to think of it that way, whether it's yoga or something else in your life, to think of it as a form of self-care and self-compassion, and be kind to yourself, but still want to move forward in your own evolution. Because if yoga has shown me anything, it's that we all have supreme ability to evolve. And so we do want to evolve, but we want to be kind to ourselves while doing it. So that is the yogic balance of self-compassion and discipline. And I'll turn off the audio recording now. Does anybody have